So who is the true philosopher? What characterizes the true philosopher? That is the immediate question. But let's take a step back and ask ourselves once again where we are and where we're going. We have achieved quite a bit in terms of an outline of a theory of human nature, a definition of what it means to be just, and I would say we're still struggling with the question whether it's better to be just than to be unjust, or do we have compelling reasons for anyone at all, to choose justice over injustice. So, and what does it mean to live a life of justice? At this point, it means to choose to have the rational part of oneself rule over the rest, especially to rule over the desires. And so I would say what we're looking for in the rest of the book is a more compelling argument to the effect that we should always choose the rational part, or that the rational part of a human being is the most important, is the essential part of a human being, and that somehow or another to live a life that does not center upon the rational part, that does not emphasize, that does not value the rational part of ourselves over all else, is to live a kind of a wasted life. That would be the life of injustice, where one's desires were at the top, where one's desires called the shots and determined what one would do. So I think there is an argument here to that effect, and it gets fairly complicated, or it gets pretty deep, and that's because we are going into metaphysics. So far in this book we have done all sorts of philosophizing, or we've gone into all sorts of areas of philosophy. We've definitely, the center of the book, this question about how to live, is an ethical question. In order to start answering that question, we get into political philosophy, this just city, this imaginary city. In the process of building this imaginary city, we get into the philosophy of education. And here we're getting into metaphysics. Metaphysics is the attempt on the part of anyone to answer the question, what is real? What is the basic structure of reality? What is the world like in its most fundamental aspects? And so that's difficult. That is, I would say that for any person doing philosophy, and especially for a student who doesn't have a lot of experience in philosophy, metaphysics can be the most difficult thing. But as in all philosophy, the most important thing is to try to formulate the questions in your own words, to think them through, and to see that they're not really alien or irrelevant questions, but that you have probably thought about these questions yourself, just perhaps not in the form in which the particular philosopher you're working with actually puts the question. So let's take a look at this. Now, what we've got to do, or what Socrates has to do first of all, is to define the true philosopher. Who is the true philosopher? And that really begins on page 167. Now, the word philosophy, let's see it up on the screen. Philosophy, made up of two Greek words. The first one, philos, that's the first part, and that means love. It can also mean friend or beloved, but philos, let's just say, means love. And Sophia, which means wisdom. Put them together, and what you've got is the lover of wisdom. And that's a philosopher. And Socrates' first pass at defining the philosopher incorporates that. That is, he says on page 167, after he says, I think we need to define for them who the philosophers are. At the middle of the page, he says, do I have to remind you, or do you recall, that when we say someone loves something, if the description is correct, it must be clear not just that he loves some part of it, but not another, but on the contrary, that he cherishes the whole of it. That is, that if you're truly a lover of something, you love all of it. If you're, I don't know, if you're a lover of baseball, you'd like to see any baseball game. If you're a lover of art, then all styles of art in some way you find compelling, and so on. If you're a lover of knowledge or wisdom, as the etymology of the word philosopher would suggest, would mean that you loved all of knowledge. But what exactly does that mean, that you love all of knowledge? The whole of knowledge? Because that, as Glaucon points out on page 168, that would, says at the bottom, next to margin letter D, in that case, many strange people will be philosophers. I mean, all the lovers of seeing are what they are, I imagine, because they take pleasure in learning things, and the lovers of listening are very strange people to include as philosophers. That is, does that mean that people who travel around listening to the Grateful Dead are philosophers because they want to know more about the Grateful Dead music, or the people who watch a lot of television or lovers of knowledge because they want to see everything? No. But Socrates says something very revealing, I think, on the top of page 169. He says, not at all, but they are like philosophers. Glaucon, who do you think then are the true ones? Socrates, the lovers of seeing the truth. Okay, so we get a couple of hints here about who the true philosopher is. First of all, the philosopher is the one who loves the whole of knowledge. And secondly, the philosopher loves the sight of truth. Of course, both of these definitions beg the question, in the sense that they beg the question, what does it mean to love the whole of knowledge? What is the whole of knowledge? And certainly, what is the truth? Now, when we get into that latter question, we are getting into metaphysics. What is the true? What is the real? At that point, we have to pause for a moment, I think, because we get into the most famous aspect of Plato's philosophy, which is presented in a very brief summary way here on pages 169 and the couple of pages that follow, and that is the famous or the infamous theory of the form.